Well, hello and welcome to yet another edition of our ongoing series, AP United States History and You. Well, today we have a special edition in which we don't actually cover any new material. Instead, we address some of the best ways for you to crush and melt the AP exam, specifically the section called the document-based question. Now, some of you are brand new to the DBQ, while others of you might still be recovering from the trauma associated with doing a DBQ in a previous AP course. But in truth, everyone is pretty much in the same boat because in September of 2023, Lord and Lady AP decided to announce big changes to the DBQ portion of the AP exam. And the good news, no, it is great news, is that they have adjusted the scoring rubrics to make it even easier for brilliant students such as yourselves to get great scores on the writing portion of the test. So, if you are someone who fears change, don't, because I will be teaching you the same strategies and skills that I do every year. It's just that if you happen to deploy these strategies on your exam, you're likely to get an even higher score than you might have otherwise gotten. In other words, follow my strategies and you are likely to be smiling when you check your AP scores in July. Step one, get over your fear, your loathing, your unwillingness, or your anxiety about writing essays on big exams. It's hard, but you do hard things well every single day. And so exam day is going to be no different, especially after you've had a lot of experience writing these things. Now, I'm not promising that it will be a bouquet of flowers, that you're going to learn to love the DBQ and welcome, as you might welcome a fragrant bouquet of flowers. But it is possible that as you learn the skills to crush and melt the DBQ, you will begin to enjoy all of the winning. Of course, unless you are a Carolina Panthers fan, in which case, better luck next season. Today, we will take a quick look at the structure of the DBQ and then take a look at the newly revised rubric and remind ourselves how to earn the first 6 of those 7 points in the 7-point rubric by mastering the following: thesis, historical contextualization, interpretation, and analysis of evidence, and use of evidence beyond the documents. And also, as a special bonus, we can even get a brief glimpse of the elusive 7th point called complexity and how to earn it. And because of the new scoring guide, it might not be quite so elusive anymore. And so the good news is that the new DBQ grading scale plays to your strengths and rewards you for doing all of the things that you've been practicing so far this year and that you will do from now until May. In other words, you've got this. So let's learn how. Well, depending on your familiarity with the AP history exams, you might know that the DBQ takes place in the second half of the test, after the multiple choice section and after you answer short answer questions. If you're still having trouble locating it in the exam, look here. The DBQ is in this 100-minute block of time, the first 60 of which are devoted to the DBQ, 60, 6-0. And note that the DBQ is just one long essay, and you don't have a choice of your topic, and it's worth 25% of your total exam score. Now, those things might make a lesser student freak out, but you are not a lesser student. You are a greater student. So let's figure out how to dominate this section of the exam. You probably have already noticed that this slideshow has a lot of words in it, and they're almost all taken directly from the official APUSH course and exam description, which is available on the College Board website. Feel free to download the 560-page PDF, or maybe just pay attention to these words that I'm sharing with you right now. As the College Board describes it, the DBQ presents students with 7 documents offering various perspectives on a historical development or process. And then it asks those students to respond with a historically defensible argument that correctly uses evidence and analysis to support a complex and nuanced thesis. The part that I want to make sure that you see here is that the DBQ will not address anything that happened before 1754 or after 1980. Anything in between the 7 Years' War and the presidency of Jimmy Carter, that's fair game, but no Puritans and no Ronald Reagan, which is a shame because Reagan loved using that Puritan phrase, city upon a hill. But I digress. Well, by now you have probably already seen at least some DBQ grading rubric, but you might not have seen this newly revised one. So listen up or just keep watching as we dig into each of the pieces, looking at what is significant and how you can make sure to earn all of the points possible. That way, you can help get a 4 or 5 on the AP exam and set yourself up for continued domination next year and also in college. Well, as you can see here, the first 2 points on the grading scale should look pretty familiar because we've already been dealing with them so far this year. 1 point for the thesis statement and 1 point for historical contextualization. And they're the same ones from the old DBQ rubric. Still, let's look closer at both of these. To earn the thesis point, you need to respond directly to the prompt, and that means answering the question directly. Often these questions are to what extent questions, and so your thesis must actually measure extent. To take a totally random DBQ prompt, to what extent was American society transformed by the revolutionary period 1775 to 1800? Well, to what extent? To a great extent, to a moderate extent, to a very limited extent. Remember, folks, it's complicated. And so you need to avoid making overly simplistic responses like American society was totally unrecognizable by 1800, or interesting but off-topic arguments like the United States emerged as one of the great democratic nations. Just answer the question directly, measure the extent, and establish some kind of line of reasoning. Now, this line of reasoning part often gets overlooked by students, and it's why otherwise brilliant students sometimes don't earn the thesis point. So if you say something like, the most profound transformations were political and economic, but the social structures remained largely unchanged, you, my friend, have established a line of reasoning. That is, a plan for how you're going to build and support a historical argument. And in so doing, you've both measured the extent and then shown the reader where you're going in this argument. Although you can have a thesis statement anywhere in the paper, go ahead and put it in your introductory paragraph. That way you and your reader are on the same page about what you're trying to prove from the very beginning. And here's a key. Be sure to underline your thesis. Underline it, or circle it, or label it in some way. It's not a requirement on the exam, but it is a requirement in this class because it helps your reader to know what you're trying to prove. And anything that you can do to make your reader's job easier will end up helping you in the end. So underline it, circle it, but definitely note which part is the thesis. Now, the second point is earned by providing historical contextualization for your thesis. In other words, situate your thesis statement in the larger historical context surrounding the issue. And because your thesis is in the introductory paragraph, so too should be your HC. That's historical contextualization. Avoid flowery language that describes the topic but wastes your precious time. The American Revolution is fascinating. A single shot rang out on Lexington Green. The revolution's imminent. What do you stall for? Instead, orient your reader to what is happening in that time period. Something like, after years of agitation and protest against what colonists felt was an increasingly exploitative relationship, American patriots rose up to first challenge and then replace the British colonial system. Rebelling against what they perceived to be violations of their natural rights, as spelled out by Enlightenment philosophers, Americans took up arms to have a voice in their own government. See how it's more than just a sentence, but it's not a full paragraph. 2 or 3 good sentences here that help to set the scene for the thesis statement that follows. And again, help your reader out by labeling your historical contextualization. Label it with an HC. That way, your reader knows exactly what you're trying to accomplish here. Now, if you remember these helpful hints, you are well on your way to writing a great essay, and you've already gotten 2 points and you've put them in your bag. Okay, here's where things get interesting. Using evidence to support your thesis. Now, the whole essay is only worth 7 points, and you can earn 3 of them right here. And I should add, it's even easier to earn these 3 points than in previous years. So let's figure out how to do just that. Well, here's the most obvious thing. In a document-based question, your argument must be, in fact, based upon the documents. And so it means that you need to be able to read, interpret, and analyze the documents, and then use them to support the complex thesis you wrote in your introduction. Now you earn 1 point just by using 3 documents to, quote, address the topic of the prompt. Just mentioning them or how they're relevant to the topic gets you a point. Obviously, you know better than to stop there, so consider that you should earn the 2nd point if you go a step further by effectively using 4 of the documents, and that's 4 out of 7 that you've been given. And I should say that's 2 less than you needed to do under the old rubric, but 4 of the 7 documents. And to effectively use them, that means you need to go beyond just describing them. You need to analyze and evaluate them and deploy them in support of the argument that you've made in your thesis statement. So again, 2 points just for correctly using 4 documents in support of your thesis. Now, many students, if they ever get there, will stop there. But you are a lot smarter and a lot more capable. So I know that you will use all 7 of the documents to support your thesis. Now, notice this does not mean summarize the documents or describe the documents, but use them as tools to support your thesis. Speaking of tools, think of each document like it's a big carpenter's nail and use it to hammer home your point. And I'll use all 7 of the nails. And you use all of those, and you will be able to prove your thesis. Now, you might ask, Mr. Laskowski, do I really have to use all 7? Wouldn't 6 be just as good? Well, nameless student, the answer is no. 7 is greater than 6, and students who use 7 documents get higher scores than those who use 6. I'll explain why in just a few minutes. But notice at this point, we have already gotten 4 out of the 7 points that you can get on the DBQ. And that means that you're already in at least the top half, if not the top third, of all students taking this exam nationwide. But let's not stop there. Let's keep going. Now, all year long, I will be asking you to include evidence beyond the documents in your DBQ responses. This is because EBD, as we like to call it, shows your reader that you know not only can read documents, but you can also link them to other things that you studied and were able to recall. In previous years, you needed to provide 2 pieces of evidence beyond the documents to get credit, but look here. This year, you get a point for successfully deploying just 1 piece of EBD. Of course, you are going to want to use at least 2 pieces of EBD just to be on the safe side. Why? Because your reader might not be convinced by the first piece of EBD that you include, and so go ahead and add a second and label it too, so that you can show your reader just how much evidence you can marshal to help support your thesis statement. So to review, requirement, 1 piece of EBD. Your DBQ, at least 2. Now, one more note about deploying your evidence beyond the documents. Just listing a noun, Constitution, Whiskey Rebellion, is not going to earn you the EBD point. You need to use it as another piece of evidence, another nail, shall we say, or an example, or as a means of clarifying or extending the argument that you are making. This probably requires at least a good sentence or maybe two, just to make sure you can convince your reader that you've earned the point. Now, make sure that your essay has at least two pieces of EBD, and feel free to label them, as I said, so that your reader knows what you're doing. But why not provide an extra piece of EBD, or two, right? Just to give yourself some wiggle room. Okay, let's move on now to the next piece. We have gotten historical contextualization, we've established a thesis, we've used documents well, and we've found some evidence beyond the documents. And so if you think about your score right now, you're probably sitting pretty at about 5 points out of your 7. Should we stop there? Of course not. So the last few points deal with something labeled analysis and reasoning. And the most important part of that is something that you already know a lot about, sourcing. So take a look at this. If you successfully provide sourcing for just 2 of the documents, you get a point. Now, in previous exams, you needed to do sourcing for at least 3 documents, and now it's just 2. Of course, you should do at least 4 on any essay you write for this class. See wiggle room above. But how can you source a document? What a great question. As you analyze the document, you can provide any of the following. You could either establish the historical situation in which the document was created, or you could list or explain the intended audience for which the document was created, or you could explain the purpose for which the document was created, or you could establish the point of view of the creator of the document. Again, historical situation or intended audience or purpose or point of view, H, I, P, or P. Now remember that earning the sourcing point is not as simple as simply saying the intended audience was probably the American people. That won't get you the point. You need to explain how the bit of sourcing, in this case, intended audience, is important and how it supports your thesis. Maybe something like, the intended audience was Americans who hadn't decided whether or not to join the revolution, hoping that they could use their economic power to support the Patriots' war effort by manufacturing homespun American products. Something like that that digs a little bit deeper. That's how you get the sourcing point. But Mr. Laskowski, how many documents should I source? Well, hello there, again, nameless student. You should try sourcing 5 or 6, but definitely do at least 4. Again, we want to build in some wiggle room so that even if your reader isn't impressed with one piece of sourcing, you'll still earn the sourcing point. Okay, you see what's happened here? Just by doing the things you already know how to do and the things that you will have tons of practice doing by the time May rolls around, you are able to earn not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, but 6 points out of the 7. And my friends, if you have earned 6 points on this DBQ, you are almost guaranteed a 5 on the AP exam. But why stop there? Let's go for a perfect 7. To earn the ever-elusive complexity point, you can do any number of following things, and I'm going to list them all below. But first, you should know that it used to be very, very difficult for students nationwide to earn the complexity point, and it was probably pretty embarrassing to the College Board. And so they changed the rubric and made it much, much easier to earn the complexity point. In fact, I used to say that the reason we don't spend so much time in class on complexity point is because earning a 6 out of 7 puts you so far above almost all of the other 500,000 students who will take this exam that you're already going to get a great score on the exam overall. So who cares if you run out of time and can't get to the complexity point? Don't worry about it, so long as you've earned those first 6 points. But now that the rubric has been changed, you should definitely benefit from this change. The top half of this explanation essentially says that you can earn the 7th point if you demonstrate a complex understanding of the historical development that is the focus of this prompt, using evidence to corroborate, which means to support, or qualify, which means to put limits on, or modify, which means modify your argument. The rubric gives you a lot of different ways that you might earn this point. So let's look at some of them. Now, you could explain the nuance of a topic by analyzing other variables that might have had an impact on the thesis, such as connecting French involvement in the war to long-standing hostilities or geopolitical rivalries between the British and the French. Or incorporating change in continuity or cause and effect, such as Enlightenment ideals influencing the structure of government and its evolution over time. Or making meaningful connections to other places within the time periods beyond the scope of the question, such as showing how the American Revolution inspired the French Revolution, or the rebellions of enslaved people in the Caribbean, or the colonial uprisings in Latin America. Or confirming the validity of your argument by using multiple perspectives across themes, such as how the revolutionary experience reflected our sense of exceptionalism dating back to the Puritans, or the fact that we took ideas about self-determination and applied them eventually to the League of Nations. Or qualifying or modifying the argument by using diverse or alternative perspectives, such as how beliefs about self-determination did not extend to enslaved people or Native American tribes. In other words, you can earn the complexity point just by showing that, to borrow a phrase, it's complicated. But so long as you connect it back to your thesis and support it with evidence, you can earn this 7th point. Now, after I explained all of that, all the hard ways to earn the complexity point, let me now show you the 2 ways that were just added to the rubric that make it significantly easier to earn the complexity point. First, you could get the point by successfully using all 7 documents to support your thesis, like I recommended that you do earlier in this presentation. Wait, what? Really? Just use all 7 documents effectively and you can get the point? In a word, yes. In 2 words, yes indeed. But there's another way too. If you effectively source 4 of the documents instead of the required 2, you can earn the complexity point that way too. Wait, didn't I just tell you that you should source at least 4 of the documents? Correct. And does that mean now that you're going to be able to get the complexity point if you do that? Correct. And so if all of this makes it seem like the College Board just made it a heck of a lot easier to earn all 7 points on the DBQ, that's because it's exactly as it seems. And now that you know how to earn all of the points, you are ready to crush and melt the AP exam, and especially the DBQ section of the AP exam. Now, when rockets get launched into space, they usually count down before blasting off and reaching for the stars. But you, my beloved students, you are going to count up. You're going to count up to 7, as in 7 points. And if you do, you will earn a score that puts you up in the stratosphere. And when you get college credit for crushing and melting your AP exam, I'll be down at Cape Canaveral cheering you on, figuratively, of course. So learn these lessons, folks. Write a great DBQ, and when you get your AP score back in July, you will be over the moon. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the other side of the screen.